Good morning, everyone. Just going to wait a few moments as the webinar starts filling up with attendees. I want to thank everyone for joining us as we do a great conversation on how restaurateurs are fighting back on delivery charges. I'm Jonah Bliss from Curbivore, and again, we're going to wait a couple minutes and then I will introduce all our great panelists. I see people filling in on the attendee box. That's great. So we're going to wait 30 seconds and then do our intros. Yeah, so while people fill in, why don't we start with introductions? I'm just going to go off the order on the screen. So if you give us a little bio on yourself, let's start with Brian.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm Brian Hickey. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vromo. Vromo is a delivery management solution dedicated exclusively to the restaurant sector. We work with SMBs all the way up to enterprise restaurant brands, and I guess in a nutshell, we make their delivery operation more efficient, more profitable. We help them offer a much better customer experience, and we do that by automating how they manage either their own in-house drivers or the third-party fleets like DoorDash and Uber and Skiptrack and guys like that. So that's me.
Gary.
Yeah, hi guys. Gary, first of all, thank you for inviting and to be part of this amazing panel. I'm the co-founder and CEO of RestoGPT. We provide digital workforce for SMB restaurants.
Great. Emma.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liem Beckett. I'm the lead editor of Restaurant Dive. We are a digital restaurant business publication writing for executives and decision makers at major restaurant chains, as well as independent restaurant owners and franchisees. We cover every topic under the sun that is the most pressing to today's restaurateur. So things ranging from automated technology, such as artificial intelligence at the drive-through or robotics in the back of house, as well as topics like policy at the national and local level that impact restaurants. Things like labor, menu development. We try and provide in-depth insights to our readers so they can make better business decisions.
Sounds like that's plenty to keep busy with. And last but not least, Robert.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert Ananian. I'm a restaurateur here in La Cañada, California. I own a pizzeria now. I've had several over the last 30 years, and needless to say, I'm the victim to these third-party apps. That's me.
All right, well, it's going to be a spicy conversation then. Why don't we start, so the big picture is sort of about, fees, pricing. Yeah. Emma, why don't you kind of set the big picture where there's been a lot of kind of back and forth over the summer and fall with some of the service providers kind of rolling out fees, taking them back. Like, what's the lay of the land?
Yeah, for sure. So something that we've been watching, kind of broad strokes in the space, is weakening of delivery commission fee caps in major cities across the country. A lot of these fee caps were in place during the pandemic to protect restaurants, and they were hugely beneficial for operators in those markets. But now some of those fee caps are either being phased out because they're expiring, but we're also seeing pressure from major third-party delivery platforms trying to get those caps removed. So for example, in New York City, which has a 15% fee cap in place currently, Uber Eats, DoDash, and Grubhub filed a lawsuit saying that the city was essentially overstepping its bounds in regulating the delivery market this way. And that had been in kind of purgatory for a while. That lawsuit was just allowed to move forward. And that's kind of showing us that politically the temperature is shifting in favor of delivery aggregators right now. And cities are feeling pressured to make compromises with the third-party delivery marketplace now. And that means that operators in those markets could be seeing higher fees if they're partnering with third party. So that's been interesting to see that shift happen. And it's just another source of pressure for restaurants who are already under a lot of pressure when it comes to delivery. We know that customers are very price sensitive in this inflationary environment, and restaurants are already having to be very thoughtful about how they are increasing costs on their delivery menus. And when you're combining that with increased fees, that can just, you know, take away some of the shine of the audiences that they're able to access in those third-party marketplaces. So
Yeah,
it's certainly a dynamic environment. It's challenging, and that's something we're watching, is what's happening in those markets now that some of those fee caps look like they're going to be scaled back.
yeah. One sort of related note, sort of speaking about fees broadly. We saw sort of the big back and forth with Toast, right, where the sort of they quietly rolled out a $1 fee, and then the world revolted, and then they kind of walked it back, and there's sort of a big egg on the face moment. Gary, I'm curious, you've sort of gone to market with a product that's sort of a big part of the advertising is how it's fee free. How has that sort of affected your pricing strategy?
Well, first of all, we've been always advocating first-party delivery. Since my background is restaurants, we understand all those issues with third-party, other fees, service fees, and so forth, so on. So the whole product was built based on those issues, and everything we do is how to help SMBs to convert the third parties to first party in order for them to save, to build their own delivery database, and so forth, so on. There are millions of tools available for them to do that. And the only reason I would say a lot of customers of restaurants go to third parties is because the restaurants themselves are not giving them they're not enabled, they're enabled to make those orders through the direct channel, through the website, and so forth, so on. So I feel that's the main thing, and third parties as well now getting into the first party sort of environment, right? I mean, they have their own storefronts, offering zero commission type of offers, and so forth, so on. So yeah, I think everything's moving into first party.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose, in a perfect world, everything would be free, right? We could just sort of create these tools and platforms with the snap of a finger. But ultimately, software costs money. The tools and the teams that build them out cost money. So Brian, I'm curious, obviously, like, you run a business that needs to make money too. We want to live in a symbiotic world where, the platform can survive, the restaurant can survive. How do you figure out, like, what's the right way to charge for the software? Like, how do you either charge a monthly fee or a service fee or a per X fee? Like, how do you sort of factor that in?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that whatever fee you charge needs to be a fraction of the benefit that you're delivering to restaurants, right? And there should be no argument over that. That should be immediately obvious. How do you figure it out? I think you have to be flexible. We deal with different types of customers, and you have to be adaptable. We deal with, and when I say different types, you'll get maybe some SMBs, and they just want absolute predictability, and they'll say, right, well, for every single delivery that goes through my system, I would like to be able to know exactly what's happening, so we can charge them, cent per delivery if they want. Other customers will want subscription. They'll say, no, look, I just want maybe I'm heavily franchised, and I just need to be able to kind of divvy out the costs in the appropriate way. So I want like a cost per month per location, and that's how I want to do it. But then we also deal with DSPs, with third-party delivery companies. We deal with the big ones, but the smaller guys as well, who might be operational in just 1 or 2 states, we deal with them. And again, they want some sort of predictability. They want something that scales. They want their costs to come down as their volume increases. So you have to be a little bit adaptable, but I think we have to be able to sign up to KPIs. And so, we'll typically maybe do a pilot with somebody, and they'll say, right, what should we be moving the needle on here in terms of KPIs that we can improve? And it will be the things that you would expect. You're going to get your average delivery times down by this. You're going to get your fulfillment levels up by that. You're going to drive more traffic to your own website, that kind of thing. And I think if you can stand over them in a meaningful way, and what you're charging is only a fraction of what the restaurant customer is benefiting from, then you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah. I guess, Robert, as the exemplar restaurateur here, How does that sort of match with your experience in terms of like, what's a fee you need and what's a fee you can live without and what's a fee that's,
well, the
no matter what?
biggest challenge, I think, like with Uber Eats and Postmates and DoorDash and all them, is we want to charge more for our product on those delivery sites. And that becomes an issue with the customers sometimes. I mean, you're trying to make up that 25-30% they're charging us. And that's the big hassle in this game.
Yeah.
So it's always better to do the first party option, like through Gary's sites.
And is that tension come more from the customer or from the third party platforms themselves when they notice the price discrepancy? Like, who is the one pushing back when that happens?
Well, during the pandemic, they were pushing back. The third party sites were, you can't do that. So that's an issue. And then, so we never did. And then obviously the customer would complain if we did, because, well, okay, you're charging this on your menu when I walked in the restaurant, but now I'm on Uber Eats and it's this much. Yeah. So how do you battle that? How do you resolve that? That's our biggest issue.
Yeah.
But the way with food costs today and gas and everything going on, it's just a big mess.
But it's one of those areas, isn't it, that restaurants have to tread carefully, right? Because you want to recover some of the costs by putting your prices up, and you should be free to do that. But then you might get a slap on the wrist from a marketplace. Exactly. So you don't like that kind of behavior. And then similarly, there's other practices that are going on. There's tons of them, but there's other ones that tend to be, more publicized, like if you're using, say, one marketplace to do all your deliveries for you, and you maybe think about using a different one because their rates are better, or they'll deliver further, or whatever it is that's important to you. Again, the original one who have your business currently might like to give you a bit of a slap on the wrist by increasing your marketplace percentage, or so there's a lot of things like that in place. And even going back to what Emma was talking about around fee caps at the outset of the call, I think it was a nice idea to put some sort of fee caps in place because it was getting out of control and it was becoming unsustainable pretty quickly. But I wonder how much of it was a bit of a false dawn in terms of, I can charge someone 15%, for the pleasure of sending an order to their restaurant. And then if suddenly a 13% cap is brought in, fine, I can honor the 13% cap, but then suddenly I'm introducing an admin charge over here, or some other, there's about 50 ways that you can do it, and the victim is still the victim in this situation. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, which is unfortunate.
There's a lot of ways to play hide the ball, right?
It really is. And it's hard to legislate that stuff.
Yeah. And just a quick reminder to the audience, we're going to do a few minutes of Q&A at the end. So if you want to use there's a question and answer box, type it in there at the end. We'll kind of pick through some of those. I think we kind of hit on something interesting here where the sort of the platform fees, there's the headline number, but it's not necessarily a number that everyone's paying, right? Like oftentimes, if you're a mid-size or large restaurant, you're getting a better deal than, Robert's Pizza Shop. Not to pick on you. Emma, like how do those sort of pricing strategies work? Like how have we seen that play out in terms of, big brands getting big deals?
Well, it's interesting because we're seeing major chains continue to embrace third party, even some who initially swore that they would never get into that game. So, for example, Domino's recently partnered with Uber Eats, and they had said for years that they were not going to get into the third party delivery game. They know how to do delivery themselves. They're great at it. That being said, it's not a typical third party relationship that maybe an SMB would have. Domino's is still fulfilling the order with its own drivers, but those orders are being generated through the marketplace. And those types of kind of hybrid partnerships can be helpful, especially for a major restaurant chain that can afford to experiment with that, because you're given access to a broader audience. Your franchisees have another source of incremental income, and you're still able to manage, the actual delivery of your product and have more control over that. And that's something that, in addition to concerns around fees and costs, we're seeing from a lot of restaurants is just, I'm having to pay all of this money to get my product in the hands of my delivery customers, but I don't have control over that last mile experience. So that's been interesting, and I'm curious if we'll continue to see more partnerships like that, and whether there will be trickle down into smaller regional chains, and smaller operators in general, if there will be able to be that type of hybrid partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a way, a lot of these relationships, they almost treat the platforms the way, 5-10 years ago, people treated Yelp, right? Where it's a discovery, it's a place to sort of make your, oh, I know I'm hungry for something, but what is it going to be? And I don't know, does anyone remember Yelp? But like, it's interesting as their, position sort of fall in the marketplace, probably due to competitive pressure. I think the execs at the Ubers and DoorDashes of the world would say that part of the reason the fee is justified is that they're paying for discovery, right? And so, I'm curious, Gary, like, how do you, when you're advocating for someone to move to first party, how do you help them make up for that sort of lost reach, right? Like,
yeah, I think the third party should be used for a purpose. The restaurant should have their direct ordering platform. That's a must-have. And they should still work with the third party as a marketing channel, as an order generating, just for marketing purposes, because they still have their customer base out there. They could even put up their price 15%. It's okay. Let them drive the customers to their direct storefront. I think that's the strategy should be, is have your storefront, convert the third parties to your direct customers. Use the third party channels for that purpose. I mean, you could turn on, you could turn off. You don't need to have it all the time. You could have a strategy, 4 months marketing, convert them, slowly by putting QR codes, telling the customers, specials, whatever. And we've done a lot of specials and promotions like that, and we see the results. Actually, it works. And I do understand 30% is not a high amount if you calculate the cost, right? I mean, you have the delivery fees, you have the marketing fees. So if a restaurant does the same, that's how much it's going to spend. But at the same time, they lose their customers, they give away their data, so forth, so on. So I think there should be definitely a strategy each restaurant should have, which means I have to have my own direct channels. I need to be able to deliver based on self-delivery mode. But at the same time, I should be on other channels just to get that exposure to those customers who are there.
Yeah. I guess, Robert, not to make you try and recite numbers off the top of your head, but do you have a sense, pizza is sort of the classic delivery food. Do you have a sense of like channel breakdown in terms of like how many people come from first party versus third party versus just old school walking in the front door?
When I was doing Uber Eats and Postmates, I don't know, about 25% of it was them.
Yeah. And did that feel like that was incremental revenue, or just like people that would have found you another way, now you were just giving them up to Uber for no benefit?
Honestly, it's hard to say. It's really hard to, I mean, some of them we found out were literally, 3 blocks away. And like, okay, well, why did they go on Uber Eats? And why did they go on Postmates? They need to find us another way. And during the pandemic, I think a year into the pandemic, I literally had to just cancel them and get away from them because it was just a huge problem. We were very busy during the pandemic, and they would come in way too soon to pick up the order. Then you're fighting with these drivers. It was honestly, it was a disaster when it came to that. I haven't gone back to them yet. I'm working on that.
Yep.
Robert is a unique restaurant owner because he's one of those people who does not have any third-party deliveries at all. So he 100% converted to first party, and that's great business. So we have other type of customers who 90% of business is third party, and they really want to convert them to first party. They're afraid because that's the value of business they get from the third parties. They're afraid to make the move, to change things and so forth, so on. They're starting to, but like 2 different categories. One is 100% converted to first party and does incredible amount of business. Others still paying third parties the 30%. I have one of our very good restaurants. It's almost 250,000 per year that they pay. He's crying, how he could save that. So, but they're afraid to move.
Yeah. And I do wonder, if, you know, I think some of the advantage, Robert, you might have in the sense that like pizza is sort of the classic delivery food. Everyone kind of understands you can get pizza delivered. We sort of still have that vestigial instinct of like calling, you know, going through the yellow pages and calling up the pizza shop, you know, pre-Uber Eats. And so maybe other than Chinese food, like a lot of cuisines don't really have that kind of back of mind behavior. And so I wonder in the sense that it's easier to kind of go first party if you're pizza. Kind of question for everyone, like, do you see categories you think that can make that jump easily versus ones where it's really a struggle to build that behavior?
That's a good question. I mean, so we're doing first party, but you know, on our website, but we are using DSP, and that actually was, you know, being a small town pizzeria, we service about 4 cities surrounding us. At first I was leery about even doing it, and then I didn't get any complaints. And I have a good relationship with a lot of our customers. So I would hear, you know, some are not going to say anything and never order again, but I'm seeing all the repeat business and nobody's complaining. You know, people I know have said, oh, hey, it was great. You know, everything's good. You know, there is 1% saying, oh, you know, I liked when your drivers came. Yeah, but my drivers cost me this much. And if they're not busy, they're not busy enough for them, that was a hassle. It just didn't make sense. The DSP really works, in my opinion. As far as saying other categories meaning other menus.
Yeah, this question for everyone, like have you seen, like, you know, if pizza can do first party easily, you know, can Mexican, can, you know,
well,
sushi, like what's,
I know through some other friends of mine that on this virtual brands, the breakfast burrito business is like phenomenal, and it's crazy how much business they do on third party. It's all third party. I mean, the virtual brands are all third party.
Yeah.
I think
so
once you've got any kind
Mexican
of
tends to work. Obviously, Chinese all day. Any of the Asian ones, pizza, of course. You know, burgers and all that. I don't see that working.
Yeah, it doesn't travel.
Brian,
it doesn't travel at all.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, in our experience, if you're doing any kind of meaningful volume, whether you've got
works
location or 50 locations, if you're doing meaningful volume per location, first party makes sense, right? If you're not doing volume, then it's hard to keep the drivers, to be honest, because they want to be busy, they want to make money, they want tips, therefore they need volume. And if you can't offer that, then you're going to lose them. You're going to spend money bringing in new ones, and that's just a whole different type of headache that brings you back to the same place. So if you're doing small volume, it probably makes sense to do exclusively third party. Pick one, give them all your volume, whether it comes from Uber, Grubhub, DoorDash, telephone, doesn't matter. Give it all, get a decent rate, and away you go. But once you start to move into proper volume, it makes sense to use your own drivers. Customers, your more loyal customers, going to get a much better experience. You're probably going to get higher ticket prices and all the other benefits that we know about.
And you can have both, to be honest. You can have a couple of your own drivers and, you know, all these third parties as well. And like I said, the DSP works great for us.
So 90% of what we do is that exact model. It's maybe first party drivers, and it might even be one in the restaurant. And you might only look after catering because those orders
I was just going to mention that.
Right?
Yes.
But first party drivers, but they don't have enough to cope when things get busy. And so what they want, or what they tell us they want, is a system that will understand that, and then will overflow only the excess orders to the third party drivers. So they're using them and they're paying them, but they're only paying them when they absolutely have to. And it's only when their own drivers are at capacity. And that's the number one use case that we come across. And that's why they don't worry about fulfillment or all the rest of it, you know. So
well,
we have some we have some metrics. We have some metrics of how much restaurant saves. Let's take even Robert's restaurant. By connecting the phones to AI system that answers, you know, picks up the orders and sends a link, he basically freed the front end, the front of the house person who was answering phone calls and so forth, so on. So that's one employee less. That's major saving. Then a couple of drivers that he had on full time, and you know, a lot of times even those drivers weren't enough, because Fridays he gets completely busy, right? With 10 orders at the same time, big orders. So even if he has 2 or 3, it's not enough. So it was always a problem. So now he doesn't have any, but he could do all those orders. you know, and that saved them a lot. So I think overall savings just on those three things, it's at least $12,000 to $13,000 per month for a small restaurant. That's a sufficient amount. Plus, the fact that you could do the orders, you could deliver, and you're not dependent on people. You know, you could deliver as far as possible based on your territory and as much as possible. I think those are the benefits. The tech helps as far as that, save restaurants significant amounts.
Yeah. And so sort of thinking about, you know, the bottom line, there's both, you know, cutting costs and there's also driving new revenue, right? And so, Brian, I'm sort of curious, like, you know, one of the features you guys offer is this sort of expanded delivery radius, right? Where it's like maybe you use your in-house team to do 3 miles and kick it to us when it's 5 miles. Like, how do you talk to a restaurateur about making that shift about, okay, your food's still going to be good, your customers still being happy outside of your sweet spot? Like, how do you price something like that?
Yeah, there's always still a little bit of nervousness, isn't there, about using third-party fleets? And if you're talking to a restaurant, there's going to be nervousness about that in terms of cost, in terms of service levels, and all the rest of it. But they'll all agree on one thing, that, you know, they're kind of more loyal audience, which is, you know, the guys who are immediately closer to the restaurant, for example, are the ones they want to look after the most, right? They're the ones who are going to be ordering more frequently and be spending more money. And that's where that concept came from, where, you know, we were working with a restaurant brand called Papagino's, who said, look, every order that comes from within a 3-mile radius of this restaurant, I want that to be given to my drivers, my first party drivers. I want those customers really well looked after because they are the most important customers. But then I still want to be able to service a really big delivery radius. So all the orders that come from between 3 and 6 miles or whatever it is, you know, give that to DoorDash, give that to Uber, so on and so forth, you know, because it's still revenue, it's still income, but it's just going to be slightly more expensive. And I guess that's the kind of sweet spot for some restaurants. Like, they know they're looking after their most loyal fans and giving them the most attention, because everybody knows first party drivers are going to give a better service than a third party driver who's, you know, carrying 4 different meals from 3 different restaurants, that kind of thing, you know. So yeah.
Emma, is that a bifurcation that you've sort of seen broadly in the market, both on the operator and the tech provider perspective, in terms of, like, you know, within my walking distance, you know, X happens, within a broader radius, Y happens? Like, are there other examples you can point to?
Certainly, yeah. An example, we spoke with Sweetfin for a virtual event we had about a month ago, and they have a model where, I forget what the specific radius is from their restaurant, but from a handful of their locations, for deliveries within a certain boundary, those are first party deliveries that are fulfilled through delivery robots. And that's been, I believe the partnership was with Coco Delivery, but that's been something that has been driving increased orders for them, because those customers are already very loyal. First party customers, as Brian was saying, are very valuable, often order more frequently. And they're finding that it's increasing order frequency because diners aren't having to pay a fee, because humans aren't delivering these orders, robots are. So that has lowered their cost of delivery, and has been something that's beneficial for them. So that's an example that's a little more niche, but I could see that becoming more prevalent as, you know, so many of these robotic delivery companies are getting more funding, they're doing more tests in the Los Angeles area, especially. But I think that's a really interesting use case. And so long as customers are okay with receiving their food from a robot instead of a person, I think there's more opportunity there. There's also some perks that come with that model, and that, you know, these robots are temperature controlled, so, and you can't tamper with them. And so that could be something too that is beneficial there.
I think more fleets and more third-party alternatives can only be a good thing. You know, we've heard stories, we've maybe seen examples where you know, Uber don't like a restaurant using DoorDash to do all their deliveries, and so they can make life difficult, or DoorDash don't like what Uber are doing, you know, giving all the volume to Uber, and so they can make life difficult through fees or whatever. And so I've seen examples of restaurants saying, okay, so the most important thing for me is to not side with either of those guys. I'm going to go and I'm going to do some work with Relay or with Skipcard or one of these guys, or or deliver that. I'm going to work with them because then I'm not upsetting any of my marketplace, partners, and I'm not going to get penalized in that way. So, so more, I guess, more of these delivery options is a good thing, and even looking at what how that pans out down the road. Right now, you've got 3 major marketplaces worth talking about in the US. Things change quite dramatically when there's 2. Right now they're being super competitive because there's 3 players in the market, and it's difficult for them to be profitable when there's 3 players. You kind of need 40% share to be profitable in that kind of business. And so when there's 3, it's a little bit difficult. And so they're still competing and they're still being competitive, you could argue, with some of their rates. But when that becomes 2, if it becomes 2, and it's been, widely publicized that Grubhub is, looking for an acquirer, then that's not a good outcome for restaurants and for fees and all the rest of it. So but that's probably a couple of years.
That's and quick to remind everyone, please put Q&A questions in the box. We'll get to that in the end, but I really want to see what the audience is thinking. But I think it's a good question. Like there's sort of games that the large marketplaces can play. How can a small restaurateur, a medium restaurateur, a large restaurateur stay on the good side of the 3PDs and not get penalized? And like how do you play that game smartly, let's say? Anyone?
Yeah, I could answer. We provide this dispatch service, and it's connected to all of those parties. And it's based on restaurant choice. So restaurant could obviously choose the cheapest, fastest, and so forth, so on. So he doesn't care about which is the delivery party, as long as it gets there on time, and he could control the delivery experience based on certain fees and so forth, so on. So that's one way. So it's really doesn't matter at the end who delivers, as long as it comes on time and delivers and so forth, so on. That's one. And there's other rules actually restaurant could set. He decides who pays for it. It could pass that fee to the customer, could split the fee, so it's not that much. But at the end, we sort of did a research. Customer usually pays the same amount, even if they go through the third-party marketplace. I mean, you probably don't see that, but they add those fees. You always have delivery charge, service charge, processing fee, and so forth. So, and they all add up, and at the end, those fees are much more than if a restaurant just passes the delivery fee. So I don't think it's an issue. We haven't seen anything actually. Probably Robert also could say from a negative from customers. We've also seen a lot of pickups coming up, right? People, instead of delivering, are coming and picking up the orders, and it's just becoming more and more. So probably that's probably could be a reason as well. But yeah, restaurants today have a choice. If you have the correct technology, how to use it, how to pass the fees, how to save, and use that to the max.
Yeah. One thing that we chatted about when we did our little planning call that I think was sort of a fun point to resurface is that, let's say that you're restaurant A and you've managed to negotiate like only a 20% marketplace fee, and then you have a competitor that's still paying 30%. You might think that you've beat them, but in the same sense that if 3PD can then say, okay, like someone searching for, hot dogs, am I going to have the order the one where I make 30, the one where I make 20? And so there's kind of what you negotiate can come back to bite you now.
Yeah, there is such a thing as negotiating too good a deal, isn't there? And the same could be said for some of the big huge brands out there who are going to negotiate rates that nobody else is going to get. So where everyone else is paying 15%, they're paying 5%, and they've written it off as a customer acquisition cost, and that's fine. But that if you're a marketplace, then the first thing you want to do is take those customers, and there'll be lots of them, and move them away to a different restaurant who's paying,
Exactly.
15%, who has a higher ticket price, all that kind of stuff, and then the marketplace are happy. But at the same time, if you're one of the really big guys, then you're probably big enough to be able to negotiate a deal whereby you're paying, I don't know, you one, the marketplace are not allowed market to your customers, or two, you're only paying a higher percentage on, incremental customers, and anybody that's been with you before, you're paying a lower rate on. So there's a number of different ways, I think, that they play that game. What is surprising to me, though, because there are things that smaller restaurant chains and brands can do, to differentiate and to stay on everybody's good side, but it's difficult to negotiate with just enormous scale like a marketplace, isn't it? But one thing that's always seemed unusual to me, and maybe that will change, and this is more of a kind of an industry kind of observation, if you like, is that there's lots of companies out there, everybody deals with them, the likes of Toast, Olo, Square, Lunchbox, all these guys who have tens of thousands of restaurants, lots and lots of individual mom and pops up to chains, tens of thousands of these restaurants on the network. And you would think that there is something that can be done there to maybe protect these restaurants that, that are working with you, that are paying you, and I don't know, maybe use that kind of scale to actually negotiate better rates with the marketplaces on behalf of your restaurants. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that nobody's kind of gone there yet,
Yeah.
It's no different from a very large restaurant chain who might have 10,000 restaurants, but only own 500 of them because the rest of them are franchise. In the same way, a Toast or a Square of tens of thousands of restaurants, they don't own the restaurants. They make revenue from the restaurants, but you would think that there's more that they can do to protect those restaurants and to make things more sustainable for them.
Yeah, I think that segmentation kind of requires a level of just nuance that someone that's just running one business and they've been doing it for decades might not even know to think about. So it's definitely a place where some of the larger brands have a leg up. Emma, I'm curious, have we seen, you sort of started this conversation with a nice sort of summary of policy. Like, is that something that policymakers have looked at in terms of like making sure the marketplaces are actually neutral in how they, divvy up traffic or anything like that?
I don't know about traffic specifically, but I do know that kind of on a macro level, the attempts to further regulate the third-party delivery marketplace have not been very successful so far. For example, California's AB5, which was an effort to regulate how delivery aggregators defined their drivers, that was, passed, and they were going to be independent contractors, and then that was challenged and went to a referendum and is now in kind of a judicial purgatory. So it's interesting. I think there are certainly still certain municipalities that are trying to impose further regulations on this space and have more protections for restaurants, SMBs especially, that are working with them. But it's been a difficult process so far.
Yeah. So I think it's probably a good time to sort of start picking up audience Q&A. We got two interesting ones here. So an anonymous attendee is asking, what are the most effective methods for negotiating with third-party delivery platforms? I suppose, Robert, did you find any way to negotiate effectively?
Not really.
The horse head.
Not really. I haven't been back to the table yet, so that's yet to become, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Brian, have you seen anything about, since you kind of have a lot of customers that maintain that dual stream, like how do they get a better rate without getting too good of a rate?
Yeah, a couple of things. There's the age-old classic, right, which is don't work with them all, right? And you see quite a bit of that where somebody's working exclusively with one partner and they've got a really good deal. Because of it, now there's been a bit of a shift away from that with some of the bigger chains in the last couple of years, but it's one way of doing it, because there will be a lot of duplication as between for example DoorDash and Uber in terms of the customers that you're getting. So exclusivity is one way of doing it. I think just differentiating in terms of what your restaurant is offering, and if you're churning out some interesting kind of marketing content, that's always really interesting for restaurants or for marketplaces, should I say. So that's another one. On the delivery side, again, just pooling all of your deliveries, because you'll get restaurants that will say, look, I'll let Uber deliver the Uber orders, DoorDash deliver the DoorDash orders, so on and so forth, which is very, very messy to manage. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to switch to self-delivery. I'm going to take orders from everywhere, but I'm going to give them all to one fleet, and I'm going to get a really good rate from that fleet if I give them all my volume. And I see a lot of restaurants kind of moving in that direction more recently.
Yeah, I agree with Brian here. I think the key here, it's very simple. You take the self-delivery mode, pay 15% or 50% off from the commission, and do the deliveries to the third parties. You easily save a sufficient amount. I think that's the model that the restaurant should use. Yeah. Then you connect with Vromo or those type of companies who could take the orders and deliver. So what happens is you pay 50% less at the third party marketplaces. You charge the customer. So you save a lot.
Yep. So Tom's question is, are delivery services operating mostly in large urban areas, or are they seeing adoption in smaller cities? Emma, why don't we have you tackle that one?
I think these services are becoming pretty ubiquitous. I would say that these smaller regional players are still making their bread and butter in smaller cities, smaller suburban markets. But certainly these big players are trying to be as widespread as possible, and exploring more suburban markets too, when initially the push was mostly on kind of urban segments.
Yeah, just jumping in here myself. It's interesting, right? We've seen there's an organization called the RMDA, which is like this aggregator of local players. And yeah, it seems like maybe even just a few years ago, if you were servicing a small town or a college town or something, you had a lot of these brands that had been kicking for decades, even back to just sort of doing phone orders. And it seems like a kind of just retrenching market at this point, in the sense where even a town of 10,000 people might have a Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub kind of volume at this point. So it's getting tougher for the little guys to survive these days.
But some of them have, that said, some of them have surprisingly good rates. Like RMDA have probably got about 550 members, so there's a lot. But within that, there's a group of relatively well-established ESPs, and their rates are surprisingly good, even when you put them up against an Uber or a DoorDash. And that's because they've retained their drivers for a long time. They pay them well. They have a lot of volume going through their system, because they're not just dealing with restaurants. They're delivering, retail products. They're delivering auto parts, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of on-demand stuff going through the network. So yeah, some of the rates are pretty competitive.
Yeah. An anonymous attendee, I think it's a good one for you, Gary. For restaurateurs looking at alternative delivery models, what would be the key considerations when deciding whether or not to do 3PD?
When deciding not to do 3PD?
Whether or not.
It all depends. It all depends. But I feel they should. The third-party delivery makes sense. It all depends again on the restaurant. As I always speak about, the first-party delivery, first-party ordering. That's the only model you could use if you want to say.
I think we're losing you there.
I think we're losing them.
Number two, calculator, sort of flips.
I think we lost Happy there, but I think just in the interest of time, I think one last question, and it's addressed to everyone, so we'll kind of use this as our kind of final thought. Someone's just asking, sort of broad question: how do you see small restaurants managing food delivery? Does it make sense to have a tech-savvy person on staff? Again, kind of let's just have everyone do one final thought on where to take this. So why don't we start with you, Brian?
I don't think you need a tech-savvy person on staff. You shouldn't. The system, I'm not just talking about our system, but our competitors, they're not they're designed to be intuitive, you know, whether it's a dashboard showing you what's going on in the restaurant, whether it's a driver's app that your drivers are using, you should be able to figure out how to use it in about 30 seconds flat. And, you know, whether it's our team or someone else's team, there's people there that are paid to explain how to set this up and will hold your hand as you do it and are there to answer your calls if you get in trouble. So you shouldn't need a tech savvy person to do it, but you should shop around. You should go talk to some restaurants who are using these different software solutions and find out what works, and make sure that they're plugged, whatever system that you use, they're plugged into a bunch of different fleets, right? Because you want to be able to switch from DoorDash to Uber to Relay or whatever it is. You want to have those options if things aren't going well. You want to have a system that shows you what's going well, shows you how well you're servicing your customers, how well your fleets are performing for you, how you're getting your times down, all that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of system you should be looking for. But you shouldn't need to hire a tech person to manage that, or to try and implement it.
Yeah. Robert, would you agree with that sentiment?
At first I was going to disagree, but he's right. Main thing is just teaching your being on your staff. You just got to keep, because they're used to the old way, right? We take our own order, but we took the address, we're delivering. You got to get them. Okay, hey guys, watch, make sure that got printed. Look at your tablets or your dashboard. Make sure everything's going right. Watch the timings. That's really the only challenge. I don't want to say it's a challenge, but it takes time to get your staff who is just so used to the old ways to, my guys have been with me for years. And okay, and once I did that, and once everything was going well, and they finally get the hang of it, it's a breeze, to be honest with you.
Yep.
Don't switch on the system at 7 p.m. on a Friday night.
Yeah, exactly.
Gary, any final thoughts? I think
Did we lose Gary?
I think we've lost Gary. Well then, Emma, I'll let you do the any last thoughts on the subject.
I'll just say that I feel like if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that delivery strategy isn't one size fits all. It's very dependent on your particular customer base, your market, different needs that your restaurant has. And so that would just be my recommendation, is just because everyone's partnering with the big three doesn't mean that you necessarily have to. There's a lot of solutions where you can implement first party delivery. We saw a lot of restaurants get scrappy during lockdowns with, forming delivery fleets of their own and sharing them with neighboring restaurants. So it's very challenging to navigate the delivery space, but there are a lot of new opportunities that have come out of pandemic times that are available now.
Yep. Never a dull moment.
Yeah. So I'm back here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Give us 30 seconds.
So
just your parting thoughts.
Quickly. I definitely agree that there's no need to hire any tech people. There's more than enough technologies to manage that, and I think we'll see soon the surge of digital employees that will manage all that for restaurants, and I think that will simplify it. And what we do with RestoGPT actually taking that word tech out of the restaurant's vocabulary, just to make it easy for restaurants to operate.
Perfect. Well said. Well, then I think that's a good place to end this. I want to thank all our panelists. I think it was a great conversation. Brian, Emma, Gary, Robert, thank you so much. To everyone that tuned in, thank you for the smart questions. A couple people asked, there will be a recording available. Keep an eye on your inbox for that and for all our other fun updates. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.